Coming up this week in computer hardware, KRACK attacks impact everything that uses Wi-Fi. Does this mean you're doomed, or is it all being hyped up? Logitech MX Ergo Trackball Magic Leap raises another $500 million for the mystery VR. ZTE brings back the flip phone, and hey, Windows Mixed Reality, it's practically here, except for the hardware. All that more coming up next on TWiCH.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiCH.
Bandwidth for TWiCH is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 437, recorded October 19th, 2017. KRACK means all the Wi-Fi is broken. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully, so you can be confident that you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/TWiCH. Welcome to TWiCH, This Week in Computer Hardware, TWiCH weekly show that aims to bring you, well, the hardware side of things. Desktops, laptops, gaming, audio, phones, oh my goodness, phones, virtual reality, Windows Mixed Reality headsets, chipsets, processors, and storage, which is a big one today because Mr. Alan Malventano joins us from PC Per. How you doing today, Alan?
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. You know, my segues foo is a little weak today, but I'll do my best. Has anything changed in the world of SSDs? If you are shopping for an SSD, is it still basically head straight to Samsung unless there's a bargain? Anything new and exciting in that front?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, yeah, especially if you're going M.2. Their 960 series continues to be at the top of our charts, pretty much. And you can get some pretty good deals on the 960 Evo. On and off. I think Samsung was running a sale, like a direct from them sale recently on that as well. They're running all sorts of sales recently. They got like TV sales I saw come across and SSD sales.
Pony sales? Technically, it's not pony market yet.
It would not surprise me if Samsung entered the pony market because they're in pretty much everything else.
Well, until they enter the pony market, let us move on to Qualcomm, who, by the way, is a sponsor at the TWiT Network. I want to make you aware of that, so that we are being upfront. But I'm pretty sure we would have covered the introduction of a new Qualcomm Snapdragon processor. Anyhow, the 636 platform with 8-core Cryo CPU, essentially positioned between the Snapdragon 630 and 660, as Mr. Sebastian Peak wrote up on PCPer.com. It's interesting, right? Because it's mid-range priced phones. That's sort of like $300-400 range, give or take. And in some respects, it, quote, even reaches parity with the Snapdragon 800 series, which of course would be the top-of-the-line flagship-level processor from Qualcomm. Qualcomm's basically claiming 40% gains to the Cryo with 260 cores and the Snapdragon 636. The 630 has ARM Cortex-A53 cores. And the Snapdragon 636 is pretty close to the specs of the Snapdragon 660, which is also an 8-core Cryo 260 design. But as the numbers go up, strangely enough, higher clock speeds for the 8 CPU cores are there. 2.2 gigahertz versus 1.8 gigahertz. So the 660 has a pretty significant clock speed advantage. Same X12 LTE modem found in the Snapdragon 630 and 660. And which kind of makes sense. That includes the Hexagon 680 DSP, which first showed up in the Snapdragon 820, and the Spectre 160 ISP for, quote, supported image capture of up to 24 megapixels with zero shutter lag, while supporting smooth zoom, fast autofocus, and true-to-life colors for outstanding image quality. And that is straight from Qualcomm's marketing team. The 636 has Qualcomm's, I can never say this, AQSTIT AXTIC code, which is also something that has been pushed down from the 800 series, which is good, even if I can't pronounce it. Essentially, what we're talking about is a High resolution audio support to 24-bit 192 kilohertz PCM if you are into that whole high res lifestyle, along with dual oscillator support. And it's got separate clock generators for 44.1 kilohertz and 48 kilohertz base sample rates. If you're an audio geek, you're probably really curious about now. And they're claiming 130 dB dynamic range with a, quote, very low total harmonic distortion plus noise of negative 109 dB, which basically means you should hear silence when you're not playing something through the, assuming, of course, the amplifiers and the rest of the board is designed properly. But that's, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So pinning software compatible with existing Snapdragon 660 and 630 mobile platforms. And we expect phones to start showing up with the 636 in November. So it could be a nice little just before Black Friday bump in phone performance and audio performance on Snapdragon mid-level Qualcomm Snapdragon fueled phones. Excited? Kind of whatever.
I'm excited for any competition all the time. If they can, if they're gonna drop the pricing of anything, anywhere, in any product lineup of anything, that just means that potentially like the iPhone side has to nudge itself down a little bit further and to compete, and other Android devices end up getting cheaper. So yeah.
My goodness, Windows 10 VR, the fall creators. I should say Windows 10 VR is slowly rolling out. Essentially, the stuff you need to run a Windows mixed reality headset is deep inside of the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update, which should be getting pushed out to your machine step by step. Although, if you want to get crazy, you can, as of 10 a.m. October 17th, a couple days ago, basically download and force a Windows 10 Fall Creators Update. They've got some lovely instructions to that up on blogs.windows.com. There's a link to that over on PC Per. But, the big thing, I think, from a hardware perspective is the big push for VR. And it was funny. I'm sure you guys made a bunch of phone calls, unless there was a story that posted this morning that I missed. I don't think, or I haven't seen any Windows mixed reality headsets showing up, because I called 3 or 4 vendors and they were all like, "We'll have those in November."
They're just laying the software groundwork so that since some of the stuff had to be in a major update from the looks of it, so you didn't want you wouldn't want to get the hardware in November and then have to wait for the next milestone release of Windows 10 in order to be able to use it. That would be that'd be kind of sad, right? So you want it to be the other way around. And it looks like, at least as of last night, any system that I just went to like Windows Update manually and just hit check, it prompted to install the update. So
ta-da!
It looks like you don't,
right now.
Originally, while the podcast is going on, do that. Originally, you had to download like some little installer front end from Microsoft if you wanted to force it early. Now it's starting to look like you can just go the normal route and just kind of tell Windows to update right now and get it. Otherwise, it'll download in the background and do the typical thing where it just informs you and says, "Hey, I want to install an update, and when do you want to reboot and stuff." We've been toying around with it a little bit. There's supposedly some. The patch notes were kind of like here and there on some other things other than just the VR stuff. Like there were some claims of improved performance on gaming for 6 and 8 core CPUs and some other claimed improvements to game mode, which there have been like threads popping up here and there on the internet. Like on, I've seen a couple of Reddit threads and whatnot where somebody tested like one particular game across different configurations and tried game mode and tried different whatever. And people have seen improvements in some games, but we did some spot checks in the office and we actually saw, some other games performance would go lower. So it's basically hit and miss, right? It's like whatever changes they made, it helped some, it hurt some others. It's kind of a wash, at least in our opinion so far. We did that check because we were hoping to be able to publish something and be excited about, oh, look, there's noticeable improvements here that we can demonstrate. But as soon as we run into examples that went the other way, it was kind of like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And we're still toying around with what the other improvements might be. It looks like they made some other changes to something we've been fighting with at the office. Actually, was we were setting up some systems, and just the first time you try to get on the network and access file shares and whatnot on a Windows install, it prompts you and says, "Hey, is this a public network, a private network? Like, what do you want me to do?" And previously, if you chose the wrong thing, it was extremely painful in order to like go back and get that option to change the other way, to just flip it. And you had to like dig through several layers of dialogues within the Windows config. And you finally got to this thing that was a checkbox that would go either, a little tick box that would go either way. And it wasn't clear on, if you switched it one way, it was public. And if you switched it the other way, it was private. Like nowhere did it say that. So they changed that recently in this update, in the Fall Creators update. And it's now very clear, and it's also very easy to get to. You basically just go into like your network adapter properties in the newer version of the UI for your adapter properties, and it just has this public or private switch now for the kind of network that you're on. So thank goodness you don't have to go through great pains if you accidentally chose the wrong thing. When you first put the dialogue up.
Before we step away from the Fall Creators update and Windows mixed reality headsets and their support of Windows holographic, we should probably mention that pretty much everybody's making the headset for these. Dell, Lenovo, HP, Acer. Some of the speculation at this point is that Samsung's HMD Odyssey is probably rocking the best specs for one of these. Each eyeball gets a 1400 by 1600 OLED display, 110-degree field of view. The headphones are built in. Those are $499 in pre-order. They're shipping November 6th. I talked to Dell, Lenovo, and a couple other vendors, and no one had devices to seed yet. So as Ryan said earlier, as Alan said earlier, they seem to be waiting for the software to roll out before the units start shipping. Like case in point, the Samsung headset is going to be around November 6th.
Those controllers, oh man, they look like they're just itching to break. You see how the ring on the controller with the sensors is connected to the handle.
Yeah.
I have taken the Vive controllers and kind of like inadvertently rammed them into solid objects.
But you're kind of a brute that way.
Well, just generally speaking, anybody in VR, like you don't necessarily know that there's a cabinet right there. And you're trying to move in a direction with purpose. And, a thing that you cannot see in your field of view is totally right there and just going to like immovable object that, your hand.
Well, that's the joy of mixed reality, right? You should know where the stuff is.
Yeah.
Before we move on, the story I meant to open the show with but skipped by because it's just so irritating. I apparently blocked it out. We should probably mention KRACK.
Yes,
if you haven't been there,
not the drug,
not the drug, but the vulnerability that pretty much breaks, as my friend Darren Kitchen would say, all the Wi-Fi's. If you run Wi-Fi with WPA2, which is pretty much everyone, you are subject to a vulnerability called a key reinstallation attack, which earlier this week was, pretty much everyone was talking about how it was the end of all things Wi-Fi and that we were doomed. Shannon, my cohort on Tech Thing, refers to it as a dumpster fire.
Which I think is a little severe. Bad.
It is really bad. I mean, let's go ahead.
The gist of it is just that there's a four-way handshake, not a three-way handshake if you're used to TCP/IP stuff, but there's a four-way handshake related to Wi-Fi devices, and you can kind of step in at the third part of that handshake. Basically, it's a replay style attack. So if you were sniffing traffic, you could potentially just kind of like replay the third step and just fool a router or whatever is on the other end. You can fool into thinking that you're the device that was just connected, but you just lost connectivity for like a second.
Right.
So basically, you just kind of jump in. right in the middle of where the previous one left off, which is bad, right? You're just getting access. You don't have to renegotiate. You don't have to provide keys. You're just kind of picking up where the previous thing left off just by, just because you were aware of what traffic went by before. Which actually, I'm surprised it hadn't been figured out already, because that's when you look at it in hindsight, it's like, yeah, I mean, you could have just jumped right in the middle there. Like, why didn't somebody pick up on that? But apparently nobody had had looked at that particular aspect of the protocol. So
yeah, and the person who discovered it, Matthew Veenhoff of IMEC Distranet KU Leuven, if my pronunciation is even remotely correct on that one. He was basically screwing around and went, wait a minute, and then did a whole bunch of intensive testing and came out with a sort of collection of attacks that work on that step 3 of the handshake key reinstallation. So literally every device that relies on WPA2 to encrypt packets between your client, whether it's a Linux, iOS 10, Windows PC, Android device, iPhone, Internet of Things, Apple TV, aardvark with an Ethernet, well, not Ethernet, but an aardvark with Wi-Fi, is essentially vulnerable to the possibility of being
and don't
broken.
forget the other end. Don't forget the other end. All possible routers.
Yes, including the big commercial ones. So
yeah.
Now that we've probably filled a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of panic, let's take a breath here. Because, for example, the Windows patch for this was
Microsoft snuck in a patch like 2 days ago.
Yeah, October 10th, actually, about a week ago.
The trick was that they were working with vendors, doing the right thing as far as, here is this vulnerability, and we're going to try to, in a moral way, kind of announce it, but then work with everybody and make sure everybody patches it. And it was supposed to be a coordinated effort of everybody patch at the same time that we go public with the details, of the hack, right? And I think like BSD or one of the Linux distros kind of got in trouble because they patched early, and the patch, obviously the source was available, so then people could have reversed what changed in the source and figured it out early. But aside from that, like Microsoft patched, yet another reason that you should probably use open source firmware on your router, because the majority of them have patched. And like, so as an example, DDWrt, which is, like DDWrt, there's Tomato, there's other open source firmwares. DDWrt had a patch go out, I think, a day or two ago, and they patched across every router that they support, right? So they just added that patch. It works on all the hardware, that was supported by that project, as opposed to, the random router vendor that, just found out about this not too long ago themselves and probably forgot how to even do their patches by now on older hardware, right? So you just have hardware that's just going to be stuck with this vulnerability now, right? On a protocol that everybody thought was impossible to break, right?
Well, once again, we've discovered that the impossible is much more possible
Always
than
possible.
You think it is. Yeah. It is what it is. What's interesting about this, right, is the patch has been written. The patch has been written and rolled out for Windows. The patch has been written for Linux and is being rolled out. The patch for iOS/tvOS/OS 10/ the Apple universe is in their beta and being rolled out. The really gnarly one is that this affects all Android devices 6.0 and above, and that's like 41 to 50%, depending on who's doing the math, of the total Android market. And they're the people who really don't want to be using public Wi-Fi or goodness help you if you're in charge of computer security at a 3-letter agency or a large corporation or even a small corporation that's subject to industrial espionage. This is really scary, right? Because right now you're shrieking at your vendors for the corporate network to get the patches for the corporate network, and you've got to make sure all of your clients are updated internally. A lot of those clients, if you have a Wi-Fi printer, it's an attack vector. Do you really have to worry about someone seeing the packets on the traffic to your printer? It really depends on what's printing. If you're a law firm, probably. If you're a feed store, probably not. But there are some mitigating things here. If you're not using sort of the group policies in Windows or OS 10, 10.3.1, you're pretty safe at this point. Because it doesn't particularly work, and these the Windows environment is essentially being patched along with everything else. Like I mentioned before, Android's a big challenge, right? Because it has to go from Google or Android to the phone manufacturer to the carrier to you, and I've seen lags of 10 weeks for critical hardware flaws that had nothing to do with security, going from Motorola to AT&T to me, and the patch had been done for like a month at that point, so it's probably more like a 14-week delay. But here's the thing, if you run HTTP Everywhere, which is a great app from EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which basically forces your browser, it's a plugin that forces your browser to take the option, if it's there, for an SSL connection or an encrypted connection to the server at the other end of your browser. They can't read those packets. I mean, if the NSA is hacking into your phone, they probably have the resources, but below that level of surveillance, you're probably pretty safe. If you're running a VPN for all of your traffic over the Wi-Fi network, they're just going to see encrypted packets, which will do them no good. This is not something that can be, this is something that requires, a physical presence near your Wi-Fi network. So yeah, somebody could sit, on a hill a half mile from your office in Pointiagi there, or they could, throw a Pelican case with a bunch of, intelligent devices inside of it, and a big battery up onto your roof, which is something that actually real pen testers do in real life. To sniff packets or try to hack this. And this is where, the code hasn't been released. It's a non-trivial thing to do. Or I should say it's a non-trivial thing to do. What the researchers did in this case. It is, the code has not been released. Eventually, I'm sure it'll make it out into the wild. There are no tools to make this super easy. So in terms of everyday users, I wouldn't panic too much. On the other hand, I would be looking to upgrade my router and keeping a close eye on things like my, if you're the kind of person that's got 12 cameras planted all inside of your house, at some point you may want to start worrying about whether or not there are script kiddie grade tools that will allow people to tap into those video feeds if they're unencrypted. So, because it literally affects every single thing that uses Wi-Fi with WPA2, which is literally everything. And before anybody asks, don't downgrade to WEP, because using WPA2 post KRACK is still better than using WEP, which was a terrible mistake. And everybody's really sorry about that at the Wi-Fi Alliance. There's a ton that's been written about this. Krebs on Security has a great write-up. I posted some on my Twitter feed, twitter.com/Patrick Norton earlier this week. Crackattacks.com is the website if you want to sort of get the sort of full discussion of this, in human. And it also links to the research paper if you want to get really deep. Something that's worth pointing out is you scroll down to the very bottom under Q&A, and the researchers are basically, they ask a question. Do we now need WPA3? Quote, no, luckily implementations can be patched in a backwards compatible manner. A patched client can still communicate with an unpatched access point and vice versa. The same handshake works as before. It does it in the same timing, but once the patch is in place, the key only gets installed once. That prevents the attack. So update all your devices when security updates are available. To defend against all possible attacks, both the client and the access point must be patched to defend against all attacks. If you're running Windows or OS 10, unless you're doing group policies, you're pretty much safe. It's all of the smaller, more obscure things that are going to open up opportunities for people to hack. So, if your camera vendor, if your, internet, whatever your Internet of Things is, if you've never seen an update on that, you may want to start thinking about end of lifing that. If it opens a vector for communications you do not want to share, or packets you do not want to share with the universe. So,
yep. It also helps if you have all your IoT devices like isolated on a separate network, right?
Yes.
Put them on a guest network at your house. Make sure that those things don't have access to the same. It puts them on a completely separate stream of data.
Right.
Right. So that way your data that you actually care about, if from all the devices that are actively communicating and hopefully have all been patched, then that network will be secure. While a separate Wi-Fi network, okay, fine, let those things. Yeah. Somebody really wants to know when I turn my light on, okay. As long as they can't see all the other traffic, right?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I suddenly feel clever for using so much Ethernet in my house, which is not something I usually feel clever about. Oh, man. Making a strange and wondrous turn in a completely different direction, Garmin has released Amazon Alexa for your car. Garmin Speak with Amazon Alexa, $150. It's up for sale on Amazon and Best Buy. And it's basically, it's I'm going to laugh when I say this. Right? Yeah, it's Alexa in your car. But the part about it that makes me really, really happy and amused is we are just one step closer to having Kit from Knight Rider. Garmin turn-by-turn spoken. Yeah, you can get like exclusive Garmin turn-by-turn spoken directions by saying, Alexa, ask Garmin. The display is really cool, right? It's a little sort of circular box that hangs off a windshield mount, which won't be problematic in California because we're not allowed to mount stuff to our windshield, but I'm sure you can flip it over. But I also find it highly amusing, like place orders for home delivery of goods or food, create shopping and to-do lists, update your calendar, and remotely control smart home automation such as lights, locks, and thermostats. So, I'm also highly amused that I could, in theory, should I finally decide to bring Alexa into my home, which is otherwise pretty devoid of stuff like this, I could basically, change the temperature, turn on the lights, cue up some songs on Sonos, and then order a
from the
six-pack of solder. Yeah, from the car while I'm driving. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Garmin for that. And I
really think they should start making these things. They should really start making these things look like HAL.
Yes.
Instead of the Ring. I want the red orb. Sitting there, complete with the proper voice pack.
Absolutely.
That always calls me Dave, regardless of what my name is.
Well, you can go Hal. I mean, there's Kit or Hal. It's like one of Alan. What are you doing, Hal?
Yeah. I want to be called Dave or Michael by my by my assistant.
Dave. I like that thought. From the wow. They've collected a lot of money department. Magic Leap, which is the mixed reality startup that was operating in secrecy and has basically released some demo videos with the idea that you'll be able to have realistic looking, augmented reality as you're wandering around. They don't really talk about it that much. We've just seen some demo videos. And, what I do know is that, boy, they're really good at raising money.
Yeah. Yeah. When you raise $500 million on something like that. They just
raised. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They raised another. People obviously believe this is going to be awesome and make a metric ton of money because they just, like you said, it's a $502 million round D of funding, and we don't get too heavy into businesses, but that means this is the fourth time they've raised money. If I'm not mistaken, they were sitting at something like $1.8 billion before this round of funding. I did the math wrong, but I think they're at like $2.3 billion. Because Yeah, it's somewhere between 1.8 2 point something billion dollars on this one, which has led to my personal favorite Register article in a long time, Magic Leap and the fantasy funding fiasco.
Yep.
So they've released a video. They've got an incredibly content-free website, and I like the quote in the Register is from a reporter at TechCrunch. Quote, "It's still not totally clear what Magic Leap is doing, but it sure has raised a ton of money in order to do whatever it's doing." And the other thing that we know is there may be something called a Magic Leap 1, their first hardware device, which will be seeded to a small group of individuals willing to pay somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 sometime in the next 6 months. And yeah, it's I think 1.8 billion with the latest round, which is an unbelievable amount of money to raise for a hardware device. Period. I mean, $100 million for smart juicers is profoundly ridiculous. So this isn't quite that level of ridiculous, but I'm very curious to see what it actually ends up being. Should it actually ship?
Yeah, I really hope it doesn't turn out to just be this complete vaporware thing. Just I need better.
It would not be the first time.
That's true.
It's I'm curious, but wow. A lot of companies in for a lot of money on that. So either it's going to be the most amazing thing that changes everything, or it might be like a certain scooter.
Yeah.
That I have stood upon back in the old Twit Brink house, but I can't even remember the name anymore. The one that was going to change everything about how we moved in cities, and was also crashed.
Yeah. You're talking about not the one that catches on fire at random?
No. This is the one that had competent engineering behind it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
You're thinking of the little things you buy, from Alibaba that light on fire while you're using them.
Yeah, basically.
So, in any case, snarkiness aside, getting more and more curious to see what Magic Leap is doing and when they might actually reveal it. So. In the I took personal offense to that statement department. Someone out there will be excited, said PC Per. Logitech. Basically, Logitech's released a brand new MX Ergo Trackball, and I am the person who is excited about this because I've been a trackball user on and off for approximately forever.
You know what? You're not the only one. Ryan has one of these on his desk.
Yeah. I have it on my desk at home right now.
Yeah, I mean, he got it and he put it on his desk, and he hasn't touched his other mouse in like a week or two. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah,
it's
not my cup of tea, but I mean, it looks like a nice mouse if you're in that kind of a trackball mousing kind of thing. Right?
It's a thumb ball.
Yeah, I know.
One of the things I love about it is it has the ability to adjust either to a 0-degree angle or a 20-degree angle, which is the 20-degree angle being a little more ergonometric than the flat positioning. You can just sort of tilt it over on its side. It's got a magnetic base. They're claiming like 4 months in between charging, which I think is fantastic. It's got a precision button, which is not particularly useful to me because I don't drag pixels around in Photoshop anymore and have not since approximately Photoshop 1.1. But I'm looking forward to playing around some with games on it to get my sniper on. Some nice programmable buttons, scroll wheel. Their software makes it really, really easy to set up. Feels good in the hand. Feels fairly luxurious. It's got density to it, which is good because it's a $99.99 pointing device. But given that I ran one of my previous Logitech trackballs for I think 7 years before the cats assaulting the USB cable finally took it out of commission, I have high hopes that this is going to last for a really, really long time. If you currently use something like the M570, the current, it's insanely popular, right? This is This is it's been like 7 years since Logitech released a new trackball. So if you go to the M70 reviews up on Amazon, there's like 12,000 reviews, 70 something percent of which are 5 stars. So yeah, Joshua, there are people who are going to be excited, including me and apparently Ryan.
Yep.
But something that's really great is along with Logitech's proprietary 2.4 gigahertz adapter, which works fantastic to connect multiple Logitech devices to your computer. It also supports Bluetooth. So I actually had it running via Bluetooth to my laptop, so I didn't have to use one of my precious USB ports for a Logitech adapter. So it was exciting. So slightly less exciting, but definitely worth a read if you are kind of curious about drivers and how they impact video game performance. Let me flat out state, driver optimizations are critical for PC gaming.
Yeah, that's pretty much always a true statement.
But it's like, you think about it, right? It seems like it came from the, it should be obvious, but sometimes it's kind of, I don't know if awe-inspiring is the right word, how much performance improvement can be wrung out of a driver update.
A game will work with one or both vendors of the major vendors while it's being developed, and then whichever vendor that is will get a jump on performance when that game launches, and then whoever the other people are will, go, oh, wow, looks like they're doing this, and that, and then they will optimize their driver, and then they'll end up seeing gains on the other side. I mean, that's pretty much the formula. Every time there's a game launch, right? That's heavy graphics performance game. Yeah. And that's what happened here with Forza, right? It came out, AMD was able to get the jump on NVIDIA by a pretty decent margin in Forza Motorsport 7. And then NVIDIA, chewed on it for a little while and optimized their driver for this game, and then got, in this case, a up to 25% performance gain. They're saying between 15 and 25%, which is not too shabby for game performance.
Nope.
Yeah.
Whether or not it lets
update your driver.
Useful. It was more of a point of pride exercise, I think, for NVIDIA, than something that's actually going to benefit the users in the game. But definitely worth checking out over to hardocp.com. Forza Motorsport 7 video card performance updates, if you want to see for yourself just how crazy the performance difference a driver can make. And I should also point out the snarky trackball title was written by Jeremy. Not Josh. We should take a moment to thank one of our sponsors, and that would be Rocket Mortgage, ladies and gentlemen. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. I do my taxes with Quicken. It's good stuff. Mortgage experience, not keeping up with the times, dated, painful, awkward, frustrating. It needed a client-focused technological revolution, which is why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. Rocket Mortgage gives you the confidence you need when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan, because they make it painless, or at least as painless as the process can get. It's really simple. They allow you to fully understand all the details and be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. It's convenient. Trusted partners. The Quicken's trusted partners allow you to share your financial information with Rocket Mortgage at the touch of a button. It's powerful whether you're looking to buy your first home or your 10th. Rocket Mortgage is able to perform thousands of calculations in seconds based on your income, assets, and credit. Rocket Mortgage can analyze all the home loan options for which you qualify and find the one that's just right for you. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Because signing a mortgage is kind of a scary process. It doesn't need to be this scary. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/twitch. That's rocketmortgage.com/TWiCH. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLSconsumeraccess.org number 3030. And we want to thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support. AMD Raven Ridge Performance Leak APU with GeForce MX 150 performance. This is exciting. Did you guys get into this last night?
It is. We talked about it on the podcast last night. So basically, we had some data from a couple of laptops to kind of compare and contrast against these leaked numbers. Again, big exclamation point, leaked numbers. We have no idea like what the actual configuration of that machine was or whatever. But we had a Spectre 360, which is kind of a larger laptop, and a ZenBook 3 Deluxe from Asus, and that's kind of a smaller laptop. And the ZenBook has just your, run-of-the-mill Intel integrated graphics on top of the 8550U, whereas the Spectre had the MX 150. So that is an NVIDIA GPU, like a very low power GPU, just for the sake, almost for the sake of, okay, you want something better than Intel integrated, but basically the lowest performing thing NVIDIA can make that's a discrete part, basically, for mobile, right?
Right.
And that Ryzen 7, like, it's looking a lot more like that system, the Intel system with the discrete part, than the ZenBook, which does not have the discrete part. So that's pretty good performance out of out of an APU style part. Now realize that, the power consumption is obviously higher on the Ryzen part,
right.
But still pretty darn good. Definitely within striking distance of what was, pretty darn good mobile performance, that being the Spectre.
Right.
Yeah. Again, that, like I said earlier, we need this competition thing, right? Like, you want stuff like this to happen so that, it incentivizes all of the competition to make faster, better things and also make them cheaper. Especially in the case of a part coming from AMD, because the price from that part is generally going to be much lower than what I'm sure Intel is charging for the 8550U.
Yeah, competition is a great thing. I actually have an AMD Ryzen powered Dell XPS 27 all-in-one that's up for review on Tech Thing, and it's a lot of cores for the money. I like the competition, and I like the fact that it's forcing Intel to be like, oh yeah, enthusiasts, heavy users.
Yeah,
they need some love too. So keep at it, AMD. We need you.
Yep. And then there's more leaks.
Oh my goodness. Laptop powered by AMD Ryzen APU revealed an HP datasheet. So details in the first notebook.
Yeah. There's that, and we had one big major point of contention that we brought up on the podcast with this, and it's right there in those specs. Note that this machine, they specifically state that the memory is a single DIMM. And when it comes to a Ryzen processor, you kind of want 2 DIMMs, and you kind of want the transaction rate to be as high as possible. So the fact that there's one and the fact that it's running at 2400 might kind of be some negatives there for this part. In other words, might steal some performance that it would have otherwise had in a slightly different configuration. Let's just put it that way.
This looks like it's being built to a price.
Well, sure. But that's that we were talking about that on the podcast as well, is, maybe they're just going for that. And then there was also the idea that this particular part probably has a second DIMM slot. We were kind of researching it a little bit further. And it was, in this case, it was just shipping with the one, and you could possibly get it in a configuration that has 2. But it did bring up an interesting point that AMD is going to try to drop these in and suggest that companies, kind of also include an AMD option in their product lines. And those companies might have already designed and are currently shipping and building products that were based on only Intel being an option before. And Intel is nowhere near as sensitive to the 1 DIMM versus 2 DIMM, 1 channel versus 2 channel thing compared to AMD. So you might have a lot of these systems out there that were built and spec'd to only have a single channel. Maybe even a single channel memory soldered on the board that's not even upgradable, right?
Right.
And you know, and didn't really see that big of a performance hit on the Intel side, but try to stick an AMD processor in there and just, you know, connect everything and just make it work. You might be losing, you know, a pretty decent percent of performance, just kind of leaving it on the table, just due to the way that platform interacts with memory latency and just how, you know, how the fabric that ties the multiple dies together also communicates with the memory. It really likes to have, you know, two channels, and B, you know, higher clock rates on those channels. So just something worth pointing out in addition to this leak.
Well, I'm sure the reviews will be
I mean,
gracious,
we'll know, you know,
if it takes a significant performance hit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if we got something like this in for review and we opened it up and we saw that there was a second DIMM slot, we would absolutely, like, knowing what we know, we would absolutely add a second DIMM there and you know, measure some differences, probably, and, you know, most likely noticeable differences.
There's also a possibility that it may be a typo because this was not, you know, it's early yet. It's not officially announced or released.
That's true, but it's realistic that it could be shipping this way because this is the same sort of thing that that HP does on the Intel side, right? You can get it with one DIMM. You can also get it with higher amounts of memory, potentially, and 2 DIMMs for this particular model. You know, but it just kind of prompted the discussion and the thoughts that, well, you might have some parts out there that, because there are plenty of laptops that are only available with 1 DIMM.
Right.
Like that's totally a thing. Right. And that probably couldn't even fit a second one into their shell, depending on how thin they are.
Which can be immensely frustrating, to say the very, very least.
Yeah.
The ZTE Axon M, it's a flip phone. You have to see the video of this, because I'm thinking StarTAC. I'm thinking it's going to open up, you know, like a clamshell, and it flips open back to front, so it creates 2 full-size screens. And I gotta say, I was not expecting what I saw. The video you're looking at is from Digital Trends. They're out of Portland and New York. A good group of people up there. But you know, I'm not entirely sure. Wait for it. If you're watching the video, wait for it.
Yeah, here it comes.
For it. Boom.
There it is. And then
it's a second screen on the back, the same size as the screen on the front. Now, as somebody who is a serial trasher of cell phone screens, the idea of having 2 cell phone screens to destroy in one phone makes me a little nervous. But you know, it's really interesting. If you can think of a reason to use this, this is your phone.
Yeah. It is. It gets a little funky when he starts playing a video, though, and it's playing it on both sides at the same time, not spanning it across the screens, but just like you could put it in intent mode, and you could have a movie playing on both screens, like facing both directions. So maybe handy if you're sitting across from somebody at a table, and you wanted to show them the same video you were watching. You could just pop it down there, and both of you can watch the video. But you know.
Perhaps maybe they thought the big stripe down the center of the screen was problematic.
Well, if you go a little bit further in the video, there's actually getting to the point where they can play video, they can span across the screens, and they can play video across them, which that's actually they're just kind of getting to in that part of the video now. Yeah. And there's other handy stuff like you know, I like the idea of having a video playing next to the page you're working with. So maybe you were taking notes on a video. So it's sort of like dual screen desktop, but just for mobile, right? Like, you know, I mean, there's some cool ideas there, right?
There are some cool ideas there.
Yeah.
You know, and there's also the ultimate selfie camera, because there's no selfie camera. There's one camera, and when you flip it around,
that's true. Yeah, and you could totally then you could definitely see yourself
20
with
megapixel. Yeah. You
use the back facing nice camera, but you can also see it on the screen at the same time.
Oh my goodness!
You can just you know, do a Tai Chi move with the phone there and flip it around.
Man, Qualcomm Quick Charge 3.0, 3180 milliamp hour battery that ZTE says should offer 28.7 hours of talk time, according to the Digital Trends write-up. And of course, we mentioned it earlier, Qualcomm's a sponsor at the TWiCH network, and the Axon M is powered by Qualcomm Snapdragon 821, which is the one that powered Google's Pixel smartphone last year, 4 gigabytes of RAM, so you can use multiple apps without emotionally traumatic experiences. It's going to be sold through AT&T exclusively in the United States, $24.17 a month for 30 months on AT&T Next, or $725. So if not on AT&T in the U.S., you can't get the giant folding lunch tray that is the ZTE Axon M. I don't think we've seen anything that radical in phone design in a really long time.
I haven't.
So we talked a little bit about augmented reality earlier in the show. The Verge had an interesting write-up. It said that Samsung has partnered with Google to bring AR Core platform to Galaxy devices, which essentially means Google and Samsung are going to work together to make sure Apple doesn't take over augmented reality in the smartphone universe, which seems like an obvious thing to do, but had not been overtly announced. So yeah, basically it's really simple. AR Core apps, developers can put together AR Core apps that'll work on both Google Pixel devices and Samsung Galaxy devices, including the Galaxy S8 and Note 8, writes Nick Stat over at The Verge. So this is good because it basically comes down to Samsung deciding to adopt Google's AR Core rather than come up with a competing technology and set of barriers for developers to get used to or get over by any means necessary. So I think it's a smart decision by Samsung. They can concentrate on hardware rather than trying to reinvent a wheel that has already been invented and making it that much farther. The more you fragment this stuff, the harder it is for anything to gain traction. So I think this is a positive move. Now we just got to defragment the entire virtual reality market on the PC side of things.
Yeah.
Did you see the water block on the ASRock 99E?
I saw the small water block on the also small motherboard, which is just
I don't think
for
it's
an
well. If you
X299
scroll
board.
down, Jeremy wrote this up on PC Per. If you scroll down on PC Per's website, first you see the X299E ITX/AC, which is like, I think the only, well, it says in the title, the world's only X99 mini ITX motherboard. I love mini ITX motherboards. But if you scroll down, you see the thing that's covering about 2/3, 3/4 of that motherboard is the optional Bits Power designed custom water block. So
yep. And those DIMM slots on that board are SODIMM slots. So it has 4 channel SODIMM. And then there's one M.2 on the front and actually 2 more on the back. In case you wanted to, in case one wasn't enough. And since there was no place else to physically put any more on the top of that thing. So they kind of snuck a couple more on the rear of the PCB. I mean, it's cool. The guys on the podcast were even joking that, hey, why not plug a 1080 Ti into that one PCI slot? And how much compute can you possibly jam into the smallest possible area? Because you can have an 18-core CPU plugged into that thing, which is just nutty, right? Like, man.
Well, you're going to need the water cooling on that one.
If you go that route, yes.
It's a pretty wild concept. I think it's cool. I love mini ITX motherboards. This is about as dense a thing you're gonna. This is just. I'm fascinated. I really am.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea.
The pricing should be astronomical, to say the least about that. Oh wait, no, that's a Z370. Not showing up yet on Newegg. Keep an eye on Newegg if you are looking.
It'll probably be up there.
several minutes after we finished the podcast. Oh man, I saw a link to this Marco event on Marco.org wrote up. I'm going to call it a column. It's more of a rant. The impossible dream of USB-C. And I'm just going to, we'll have a link, it's easy enough to find. Go to marco.org. But I'm just going to read these first two lines. I love the idea of USB-C, one port and one cable that can replace all other ports and cables. It sounds so simple, straightforward, and unified. In practice, it's not even close.
That's a true statement. That's totally a true statement.
Because as Mr. Arment goes into in significant detail, boy, it depending on what you connect to, data protocols are different. 12-inch MacBook has a USB-C port but doesn't support Thunderbolt. All the other MacBooks support Thunderbolt over USB-C ports. The 13-inch model, though, has a touch bar. Then the right side ports don't have full Thunderbolt bandwidth. USB-C cables might support Thunderbolts, might not. Might support the ability to power your machine, might not. It's frustrating, especially if there are power issues that prevent you from using one of your ports because you have to power your machine. But it's if you've been wondering if USB-C is as complicated and the physical connection itself, fantastic. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize how much I like USB-C, the physical connector, until I realized it was a micro USB connector on the tiny USB connector on the mouse, because then I had to make sure the connector was the right side up and get it into, I should say, the Ergo MX Trackball. And then I was like, this would be perfect for USB-C, but man, yeah, it's a good read. It really walks through all of the legion of issues with USB-C, and it's a good gut check if you're wondering if USB-C is the source of your woes or if it's something else. It's good stuff. You guys are working on a network upgrade at the PC Per offices.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
Well, I mean, we've done a lot of reshuffling of stuff. Basically, Ryan and I have fallen into this thing of, hey, it's good enough, it's working. When actually it, may or may not be held together by, chewing gum and paper clips and stuff. And
duct tape desperation.
Yeah. But there was a little bit of, we're kind of tired of all of our transfers going just a gigabit at the office. So it's like, all right, well, we need to do a couple of things here. We need to, upgrade infrastructure to go faster. And we need to, while we're at that, we might as well upgrade the router, because there's no way that the router can, handle that added speed. The one we were using was even having a hard time dealing with the gigabit internet link that we have at the office. Mm-hmm. So Ken took it upon himself, did some research, and got a whole bunch of Ubiquiti gear, all the way through, to the.
I've installed a bunch
starting
of it.
Starting with the router all the way to the access point, and yeah, it's good stuff. I've messed around in the console a little bit, configuring stuff and doing port forwarding and whatnot, and it's nice how you can just, I can imagine how it would be a IT person's dream in the respect of, you go to this console and you can configure all the things. Like just from this one GUI, basically, right?
Yeah.
You want to update the firmware on one of these access points, you just select the access point and just update the firmware. You want to, update something else, you do that. You want to, it's all just integrated and just done so very nicely.
And it's fairly secure. One of the most paranoid people I know set up the network here. I did the physical installation, and he went through and redid with a new secure router to bind all our access points together, and it's a pretty ninja system.
Yeah,
and the Unify router, the Unify WAPs are really powerful. I think it's worth pointing out.
Yep. Yeah, they have good antennas, good signal, good throughput, all that. Can't really complain. Pretty good stuff. So that's part one. We're probably going to go on to some of the other parts soon on other things that we've been working on, like Explorer Alert 128 terabyte array. A few other things. Just upgrading the stuff. Trying to make some content out of it, obviously, because otherwise, we have to offset the downtime that we create from distracting ourselves, from the regular review mission with fixing the things. Yeah. Did run into some issues trying to use. I'm not sure if Ken talked about it yet, but we had like a Netgear, the very common Netgear 10 gigabit switch. That's basically the cheapest one you can get, right?
Right.
Because every other piece of hardware is like thousands of dollars more. Even Ubiquity themselves doesn't make a cost-effective and solid 10 gig switch. So we're using like an 8-port Netgear switch, and then we tried using a bunch of those Asus Tech or Asus brand NICs that came out that were like $100 for a 10 gig NIC. And we ended up with some like weird compatibility issues that we are still trying to track down. No issues if we use Intel NICs. Yeah, Intel NICs works fine. And the Asus ones, it was just like some weird. It was some really low level kind of issue too. So it was like things that you even have a hard time trying to use like packet sniffers and whatnot to diagnose. Right? It was just these weird hesitations and weird throughput issues we were getting. We're still trying to track that down. So for the moment, most of the office is still on just gigabit, but at least all the wiring is there, and all we need is just switch the NICs over in some of the other machines. But yeah, more stuff about that coming. There might be a picture in there of the bubblegum and Scotch tape file server that we were using, which was just really, really sad. Yeah, but the new stuff's pretty cool, and the best part, like as cost effective as we could possibly do it. Right. So
right.
I mean, we spent surprisingly little on 128 terabytes worth of storage. And that's, bought stuff off the shelf, literally like at Best Buy, and still managed to get some good deals and, save a lot of cash. Yeah. Good stuff.
Nothing wrong with that. So obviously there's going to be part 2, possibly more parts of the PC per Office Network upgrade. Ryan's MIA, which usually means he's traveling to go see something shiny that he's going to see under NDA. Anything you can talk about that's coming up on PC per in the next week?
Yeah, I'm still playing around with various RAID configurations on X299 and X3 and 399. Basically, the Intel and the AMD versions of their insane amount of cores things, which also include the ability to RAID NVMe devices using all of the PCI lanes that they have. So now you're not bottlenecked by the Intel RAID thing anymore. Where you used to have to go through the chipset and you were bottlenecked, at around 2 gigabytes per second. Yesterday at the office, I was getting 22.2 gigabytes per second from something. Might be getting to the point of diminishing returns when things are going that quick, because what are you possibly going to do that you need that much throughput for? But, stranger things have happened in the past where people have said, I couldn't possibly need more than gigabit Ethernet. Right?
Well, there are worse things than having, all of the bandwidth.
Yeah. So been playing around with that, and we'll have some more content on that coming up on both the Intel and the AMD side. So
nice.
8 drive Samsung 960 Pro array on both platforms and seeing how well it performs on both. We looked at just VRock, which was just the Intel side last week. You guys probably talked about it.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to round out all the testing and just be done with that so that we've seen what it looks like on both platforms. And we can, because that testing is extremely time consuming, because I'm not just going to test only the 8 drives. I'm going to test every combination all the way up to 8.
Oh boy.
Which just takes forever. Yeah.
It's always a little painful. Man, I mentioned earlier we've got that Dell XPS all-in-one with the AMD Ryzen processor inside of it. And the other thing that's happening, we finally have a curved, I want to say 38-inch G-Sync compatible desktop monitor, which I'm very excited about because Shannon's computer at work does not have a fast enough GPU to drive it. So hopefully I'll be able to get the full G-Sync experience off my desktop and see if I can be like, oh my goodness, I need to get rid of this monitor I just bought 4 months ago and replace it with something shinier without frame tearing. So hopefully my 1070 is fast enough to power that beast.
Good luck.
Oh my goodness. And since I've been saying it to everybody, you know, we've had multiple hurricanes taken out parts of the United States. Puerto Rico's been hammered. You know, there's 3,500, maybe as many as 4,000 structures have burned in the North Bay up in Santa Rosa, just north of the TWiCH offices. You know, if you're not backing up your data, it's really time to start doing that. I was thinking that a lot yesterday. Shannon decided to digitize her mom's entire collection of negatives, and she's got a review of the service she used for that, and the process and what happened and what they did, you know, in terms of, she literally sent a box with 3,000 negatives inside of it, or 3,000 pictures on negatives inside of it, you know, to Minnesota, and then got a box back a considerably long time later. But now they have the ability to take this entire collection of photos that are this huge part of her family's memories and story, and they can now back it off to a remote server. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. 3, 2, 1, 3 copies of your data on at least 2 different mediums with at least one offsite. Because you might be like, I don't live near a wildfire. I don't live near a hurricane. Well, you know what? Somebody could come in and steal your computer. They could rob your house. You could have a fire. There could be, a flood from the pipes in your walls. There's a million ways for you to lose your data. But if it's backed up, it doesn't have to be any more traumatic than it needs to be. So I just wanted to say that. Feeling real, you know. The smoke's been in the air for about a week now. The breathing has been kind of difficult for about a week now. So if you haven't backed up lately, it's time. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that this is This Week in Computer Hardware. We call it TWiCH. You can find it at twit.tv/TWICH. You can find all of our older episodes. You can find information on how to subscribe. You can figure out who I am and who Ryan Shroud is. You can probably even figure out who Alan Malventano is. And if you don't know who Alan is, trust me, he is the storage reviewer you need to be reading, and you can find him at PCPer.com. You can find me at TechThing.com and AVXL, which is the podcast I do with Robert Heron, where we talk about home theaters and home audio and just making your music and your movies as awesome as they can be, no matter what your budget is. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate you listening, and we love it when you tell your friends about the podcast too. With that, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
We'll catch you next week on TWiCH.